FBI leadership team decided not to discuss the president's actions with Attorney General Sessions, even though he had not recused himself. What was it about the Attorney General's own interactions with the Russians or his behavior with regard to the investigation that would have led the entire leadership of the FBI to make this decision?
Our judgment, as I recall, was that he was very close to and inevitably going to recuse himself for a variety of reasons. We also were aware of facts that I can't discuss in an open setting that would make his continued engagement in a Russia-related investigation problematic.
We were aware of facts I can't discuss in an open setting that would make his continued engagement in a Russia-related investigation problematic. Can't discuss it in an open session, but we knew things about the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, that let us know what a problem it would be for him to stay involved in anything related to Russia. What were those things? What did you know? Right, this was this intriguing question left open by James Comey when he testified before Congress in June. We had no idea what he was talking about until the following month. In July, when the Washington Post had this scoop, which we think explains what Comey was probably talking about. Headline: Sessions discussed Trump campaign-related matters with Russian ambassador, according to U.S. intelligence intercepts. Quote, contrary to public assertions by the Attorney General, Russia's ambassador to D.C. told his superiors in Moscow that he discussed campaign-related matters with Jeff Sessions during the 2016 presidential race. Ambassador Sergei Kislyak's accounts of two conversations with Sessions were intercepted by U.S. spy agencies, which monitor the communications of senior Russian officials in the U.S. and Russia. Jeff Sessions initially failed to disclose his contacts with Kislyak and then said the meetings were not about the Trump campaign. The information contradicting Jeff Sessions comes from U.S. intelligence on Kislyak's communications with the Kremlin. So, I mean, looking back on this, it's kind of remarkable that Jeff Sessions stayed on as Attorney General after this was revealed, that he didn't quit or that he wasn't fired. Right? In his confirmation hearings in January, he had insisted in person under oath and in his written responses that he had no contacts with any Russians, no contacts with anybody connected with any part of the Russian government.
I'm not aware of any of those activities. I have been called a surrogate at a time or two in that campaign, and I did not have communications with the Russians.
Attorney General saying in January under oath, I didn't have any communications with the Russians. That was in January. Well, on March 1st, the Washington Post reported, oh, yes, you did. You had multiple meetings with the Russian ambassador. The day after that Washington Post report, the Attorney General recused himself from the Russia investigation. The FBI knew he would have to, right? He said he would no longer oversee investigations related to the Russia scandal or anything else having to do with the 2016 campaign. In recusing himself, though, even still, he kept up the denials.
Let me be clear. I never had meetings with Russian operatives or Russian intermediaries about the Trump campaign.
So in January, he says, I definitely didn't meet with any Russians. In March, okay, I met with Russians, but it wasn't about any campaign-related matters. By July, read all about it in the Washington Post. It was about campaign-related matters. The Russian ambassador called home to the Kremlin to tell the Kremlin about his meetings with Jeff Sessions, and what U.S. intelligence agencies heard him say was that, in fact, he talked to Attorney General Jeff Sessions about the campaign. Now, that ends up being important for a few different reasons, given the news that we just learned today about the Attorney General. Today, Michael Schmidt at the New York Times was first to report that Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, top law enforcement official in the U.S., has just been interviewed for hours by the special counsel, Robert Mueller. Now, we don't know the scope of the special counsel's questions for the Attorney General. We don't know if it's of interest to the special counsel that the Attorney General has apparently made repeated factual misstatements about his own contacts with the Russian government, both about the frequency of those communications and the content of those communications. I mean, lying about contact with the Russian government is something that has already brought about guilty pleas to felony charges from two members of the Trump campaign who have now become cooperating witnesses for the government. I mean, I think we can assume that the Attorney General is smart enough that he wouldn't lie about his contact with the Russian government to Robert Mueller, to the special counsel and his investigators. But he has repeatedly said factually untrue things about those contacts in the past, including under oath. So we don't know if Jeff Sessions' own contacts and communications with Russia and his statements about those contacts and communications will be of direct interest to the special counsel. Jeff Sessions also headed up the national security and foreign policy teams on the Trump campaign during the election. Theoretically, at least, that means both men who have pled guilty and become cooperating witnesses in the investigation thus far, they both reported to him during the campaign. So that may also be of interest to the special counsel. But there's another reason why that early, mysterious warning from James Comey about the Attorney General is newly important to what has just happened in today's news. And that's because Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, he isn't the only high-ranking person in this president's orbit who has been caught out, or at least caught in a bad spot, specifically because the intelligence community heard it, because of intelligence intercepts, right? Because of surveillance. Jeff Sessions tried to deny he ever met with any Russian officials. Later, when he had to admit that he had met with Russian officials, he tried to say they'd never discussed anything about the campaign. That was blown up when U.S. intelligence intercepts captured a Russian official describing his contacts with Jeff Sessions in a call home to the Kremlin. It was intelligence intercepts that brought down Mike Flynn as well, right? We know from the statement of his offense in the criminal case that Mike Flynn also tried to deny contacts with the Russian government, tried to lie about the content of his communications with the Russian government. U.S. intelligence intercepts, U.S. intelligence surveillance of the Russian proved him wrong. That's what ultimately put Mike Flynn in the pickle he now finds himself. It was the same thing with presidential son-in-law Jared Kushner. May 26, the Washington Post, quote, according to intercepts of Russian communications that were reviewed by U.S. officials, Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak reported to his superiors in Moscow that he and Jared Kushner discussed the possibility of setting up a secret and secure communications channel between Trump's transition and the Kremlin. Kislyak said Kushner suggested using Russian diplomatic facilities in the United States for those communications. Intelligence intercepts caught out Jared Kushner at a time that he was trying to say he'd had no contacts with the Russian government, let alone about setting up a secret back channel using Russian facilities to shield those communications from the U.S. government. Well, now, just in the past few days, it's happened again. This bombshell new reporting in the New Yorker magazine, this report from Adam Entis, who used to work at the Washington Post, and Evan Osnos, who was on the show here last night. This report that once again, U.S. intelligence intercepts, U.S. surveillance of foreign government officials caught out, again, Jared Kushner. Quote, U.S. intelligence agencies aggressively target Chinese government communications, including the Chinese ambassador's reports to Beijing about his meetings in the United States. According to current and former officials briefed on U.S. intelligence about Chinese communications, Chinese officials said their ambassador and Jared Kushner discussed Kushner's business interests along with U.S. policy while Kushner and the Chinese ambassador were holding meetings to prepare for the Chinese president's visit to Mar-a-Lago this past spring. It's that surveillance, right? It's the intercepts. Over and over again with all these different senior people in the Trump campaign and the Trump administration, they make public denials, or they make denials to the FBI, and those denials got blown out of the water by evidence, specifically by intelligence intercepts, by surveillance information, right, collected by intelligence agencies while they are surveilling foreign government officials. The intelligence intercepts keep getting them. How do you fix that problem? If you see that as a problem, how do you fix that? Well, Republicans in Congress are dramatically stepping up their efforts to attack and undermine the FBI, and they are now very specifically going at the FBI to try to make a scandal out of their collection of intelligence intercepts. As Attorney General Jeff Sessions was being interviewed by Special Counsel Robert Mueller and his team of prosecutors last week, at the end of